Welcome to Welcome to Sports Tonight on a Thursday. I'm sports producer Scott Pennyman here with the NBA expert extraordinary.
Okay.
Fred,
The pressure.
Fred the NBA expert, aka Freddie Buckets.
Oh.
Frederick Campagna
Yeah,
here.
what's up?
Of course, since you're in the house, we're going to start with some NBA, and with good reason, right? I mean, Game
It's the
3 of the
finals.
NBA Finals last night, and I think it went according to kind of what a lot of us thought that game was. Well, I guess I'll say this, right? I mean, I think we came into this series understanding that the Nuggets were probably the more talented team, right? And maybe in Game 2, they kind of let things slip a little bit, and Miami kind of saw their opportunity and stole that one from Denver.
Yeah.
Last night was more true to form, I think, to what people thought the series were going to be.
Did the series just get boring again? Is that what happened last night?
I didn't think it
Because-
was boring.
No, it's not boring, but like predictable, I guess, to a degree. Because a lot of people, the Nuggets were kind of an overwhelming favorite coming in. When the Heat won a game in Denver, it's like, oh, all right, here we go.
Yeah.
And I think from someone who doesn't have a rooting interest perspective, that you'd be more inclined. You're taking down all our. You took down all our
Yeah,
stuff.
and you
What
know
are doing
what?
there?
That was a it's back now.
It's
I'm
back.
sorry.
It's
I'm
back.
sorry. It's back.
All
I'm
right,
sorry.
good.
I apologize.
I
man.
need to know what's coming.
I know
next.
it affects your mental.
All right.
Go ahead. Go for
No,
it.
so I think that anyone who doesn't have a rooting interest kind of wanted to see the Heat, at least get this thing to 2-2, which they can of course still do with the next game, and then that would bring a little bit more excitement to the series, I think overall. But credit to the Nuggets. I mean, came in there, talk about seeing your opportunity.
They did.
They took a game that was relatively close, extended it just before halftime, I think, to 5 points, and then blew that up to 10 points pretty quickly at the start of the third. And next thing you know, it's 18, and you're going into the fourth, and then you're on cruise control a little bit. So, Jokic doing that 30-20-10 thing again, which for him is like, oh, big deal.
like
Third
every
time
game
he's
for
done
him.
it. The list of guys that have done it is
Right.
tiny, but he's just doing it routinely. Murray also 10 assists.
He was big
A
time.
lot of those to Jokic. So that was a lot of the talk today, Scott, was about how those guys are just setting each other up. And there was a lot of talk about why can't other stars in the league be like that, where they play off of each other.
Why can't you be like them?
But there's no big men like Jokic.
Right. I mean, they act like you're going to go to Walmart and find a Jokic, right? I
Right.
mean, it doesn't
So
work
even
that
some
way.
of the best big men, Embiid doesn't play like Jokic.
of course not.
Anthony Davis doesn't play like Jokic. Like, he's just such a facilitator with the ball, which those other guys aren't at this stage of their career and probably never will be.
Right.
And that's what makes him so special. Two-time MVP, and as I said last time I was on here, maybe he's got a little chip on his shoulder that Embiid got it this year. He'd never say that publicly, but, he may have a finals MVP within the next few days, within the next week.
Look, and after the game, he was very businesslike. They talked about, Jokic, you went 30, 20, and 10. I mean, how does that feel? He's like, it's no big deal. Look, because I think he understands the assignment. He understands that the job is not finished. They still have 2 games left to win in this series. And as we've seen, if you let your guard down against Miami, they can come back in the series. They can come back and make things look. They're not dead yet. They're not dead until you stomp them out. So I think we understand, and I think Denver understands what sort of opponent they're up against. They're up against an opponent who I think Denver believes they're more talented than. I think they believe they have more pieces and parts. But I think that they also understand that Miami is a team that if you let your guard down, boom, they can jump back and punch you right in the face. One of the more interesting things from last night's game, though, was like some of the contributions that Denver got in the second half of that game. First half of the game, it was Murray, it was Jokic. They were kind of just handling everything. In the second half, man, Aaron Gordon got going, and then that Christian Brown. Wow, where did he come from?
Out of nowhere, right? It came from Kansas. And, a good player.
Like a tornado.
Right. Yeah, very much so. Ex-Jayhawk, and he was a big part of, what they had having success there. And seized the moment. A little Duncan Robinson-esque in terms of like a guy that you weren't expecting to do something big. Duncan Robinson did it in game 2 in the fourth quarter. Brown didn't do it the same way that Robinson does it, but he did it with some defense. He did it with, with some offense. And it was impressive, and that's the thing that could that at this point we love to overreact, and I'll overreact,
of course,
because at the end of the day I'm just kind of a fan of the sport. But my
all do.
overreaction to last night is that I'll be shocked at this point if Miami comes back and wins this series.
Shocked?
Yeah, shocked. I've the meter is at shocked because I feel like you mentioned Aaron Gordon. Like Denver now has that buy-in that you need, which Miami had all along.
Yeah.
Like Miami, Kyle Lowry knew what his role was. Martin, they all were like, look, it could be any of us any night.
Yeah.
But I felt like going into this series, maybe Denver would be a little bit too much. It's Jokic and Murray. But these other guys step up, and then everything they're saying after the game, everything Gordon said so far this series, which is just like, I don't care as long as we win. Like that's my main goal, is to win. So when you get guys deep down into the rotation that have bought in to that in the NBA, and you have the talent at the top that Denver does, because let's face it, before Murray had the injuries, he was there. So it's the casual fan might not realize it as much, but I mean he was right there as one of the premier guards in the league, and now he's showing he's healthy.
Yeah, and I think it's just, last night when coming into the game, I just really sort of wondered where Denver's focus would be. They were really called out by their coach after game 2 for really losing their focus. And I thought that was one of those games where I don't think Denver believed that Miami could beat them in game 2. Like when you sort of saw their mannerisms and everything, I just really feel like Denver sort of let their guard down just a little bit. As a team that's never really been in this close to a championship before, a lot of those guys have never been this close. I feel like that's part of them learning and understanding what it takes to be a champion. I thought in game 2, I think because game 1 looked so easy, I thought game 2 for them, they sort of let the gas off the pedal a little bit. And look, Miami's one of those teams that if you do that, they'll jump up and pop you. And that's what they did. So now I wonder, like to your point, I wonder if Denver has said, okay, all right, we know we can't let off the gas much because we know what we're up against.
Right.
Now it's time for our talent and our basketball ability to take over this series. I mean, I guess if that's the case, then I guess I could see maybe Denver winning in 5 just because I think they understand who they are now. They understand what they're up against. They had their embarrassment game, which is game 2. I won't call it an embarrassment game, but that's one game that they let slip in this series. So now I just wonder, is this the point where Denver really just takes control of this series and stumps Miami out?
I kind of feel like it is. They play a aesthetically good brand of basketball.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think sets Jokic apart and Murray apart is they're both smooth too.
They are.
Like Jamal Murray is just such a smooth player, finishes at the rim well. He's got a great shot. Jokic, he's just great. I don't know what else you can say, really. And one of the things that I do notice about Jokic, and maybe you picked up on this too, is a lot of times when he could be called for an offensive foul, I mean, he creates just enough contact that a guy can't really sell it.
Right.
So he'll score on like a Gabe Vincent, where I feel like if it was Embiid or some of the other bigs around the league, that they would be a little bit more forceful, just a tiny little bit, to be able to where Gabe Vincent could sell that, fall on his back, get the offensive foul. He just does such a great job of controlling a massive body, around the paint. It's impressive. Yeah,
it's kind of what I called, me and my buddy were talking earlier today after watching the game last night. And I think I said this to you one time too. Jokic and Jamal Murray really remind me a lot of a modern day 2023 version of Tony Parker and Tim Duncan. Not saying that Jokic is as good as Tim Duncan, not saying that Jamal Murray is as good as Tony Parker, but when you look at how they play the game, when you look at just how fundamentally sound Jokic is, when you look at how Murray can feed off of him, it really just reminds me a lot of Parker and Duncan and that combination for many years, but kind of like a 2.0, kind of like an updated 2023 version of basketball
because Tim
version
Duncan,
of those guys.
back in those days, he could be 14 feet from the basket and closer. His
Exactly.
entire game, back to the basket, low post moves, all that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. When you have two guys that are, have that kind of a basketball IQ. The other thing that I've really stood out to me about Jokic is his hustle, and not really just like, I'm going for a loose ball type of hustle. Right. I'm saying every single play he's moving offensively when he doesn't have the ball.
Yes.
He's just he makes for such a dynamic offense, like single-handedly,
Right.
in a way that only guys like, Magic Johnson, and there are very few guys in the league that have done that over the years. And it's so for those reasons, Scott, I think we could be looking at Denver in 5.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. I think the only I still think Miami can win the series, right? Because they're still alive.
Yeah.
They're only down 2-1.
No, they're the classic team that, still could.
Right. But I'm with you from the aspect of I think the only people that can beat the Denver Nuggets in this series is probably the Denver Nuggets, or injuries, right? I mean, I think that if Denver comes into these games with the focus that they should, they're the better team, and they'll probably be able to close this out and be NBA champions.
Yeah.
And speaking of NBA champions, right?
Yeah.
So check out this story. So Chris
Okay.
Paul, on a podcast a few days ago, came out and said that his daughter, who he said is one of the sweetest girls in the world, she's goes to school and she's friends
Most
with
dads
everybody.
say that about their daughters.
Well,
I'm sure
right.
she
I mean,
is,
no one
but-
says my daughter's rotten. Yeah, of course, rough. But what he said was that she gets taunted and bullied at school.
Okay.
Because her daddy has never won an NBA championship, which I think I'll just start off briefly by saying that's kind of nuts, because how many dads out there are, future NBA Hall of Famers who have banked over $300 million by playing basketball, right?
Yeah.
So that alone just mind boggles me how another kid can taunt him, seeing how successful Chris Paul has been. I'd love to see what that kid's dad does for a living. But that's kind of crazy, right? I mean, just where have we gotten to, and I guess I'll pose the question like this. At what point in society did we get to it's either all or nothing? It's either you win an NBA championship and be an important piece of that championship team, or your career means nothing. How do we get here?
Well, I mean, let's. So our little headline there says teased, and I'm glad it says teased instead of bullied, or even taunted for that matter.
Right.
Because let me just take a different angle on this. I mean, I got 3 kids. You think that any of my 3 kids have ever haven't had a one of their friends or someone that go, your dad can never get the weather right.
Bro, your dad said it was going to be 80 and sunny yesterday, man. It rained,
I mean,
man.
my
Your
kids,
dad sucks.
honestly, if they go out and it's unexpectedly raining, my kids are always going to hear, man, your dad probably got this wrong. So it's for real. So to me, for Chris Paul to bring this up as kind of like a major issue, and maybe, did he do it on a pod? He must have done it on a pod.
Yeah, he was talking about
He
his career on
probably
podcast.
didn't even want it to get to this level, right? Because now it's just going to feed on itself.
Right.
Right.
Of
So
course.
his daughter is going to hear about it, see it.
Other kids
whatever.
are going to do it now because Chris
but
Paul's
she
going to
might
talk
be
about
like,
it.
Dad, I don't want you to
Single somebody else.
Tell everybody, you know, or say anything. So, so from my perspective on that, this is like a big nothing. The bottom line is that, like, listen, everybody's not nice in the world these days, any days ever, and I don't really. This kid to say that is like, and it's also too. It's a fun Chris Paul narrative. Let's just face it. I mean, it's almost become endearing about Charles Barkley, that he
Right.
never won, right? So that's almost become like I don't think he wears it as a badge of honor, but he's kind of like accepted it, and it's just, it's just one of those things. And Chris Paul's another guy, and I think part of it is that, Chris Paul, like you said, has had a good enough career to win one. He just hasn't yet.
Yeah, right. And it's just, to me, it does open the door to a bigger issue. Of course, I'm not making it like it's a huge deal, right?
Yeah.
But I do think it's sort of a microcosm of our society now, especially our sports society. I just think that's just the way it is. I think that your championship is, your it seems like in today's world, your career is validated, especially in the NBA where individual players mean so much as far as, winning. It just seems like your career is only validated if you become a champion, and not only if you become a champion, if you're a core piece of a NBA championship team. And I just think that's kind of crazy because there's so many guys out here who have had great careers, guys like Russell Westbrook, Karl Malone, and all those guys, but we blame them, and even like guys like James Harden, but we look at them and we go, if you didn't win it all, your career meant nothing.
Let me ask you this. Do NBA players, when they get later in their career, chase rings?
I think some do.
Right?
Yeah.
So obviously it means something to them.
Well, yeah,
We
look,
see it across all sports.
Yeah,
guys will later in their career, once they've made some money, try to go to a place where they
Take
will
less.
flat out say, I want to win a championship. So in some ways, winning a championship is the pinnacle of someone's career.
Yeah.
Whether Chris Paul, with all that he's accomplished, or some of these other guys would consider a championship at this point to be the peak of their career. Like, I don't think it's the media. I don't think it's society. I think that for guys who play, winning a championship is really important. But to me, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Chris Paul, because the reports were that he was going to be released by the Suns. Then there was some conflicting stuff there that he was going to stay with the Suns, wants to stay with Booker and Durant. So I think it'll be interesting to see where Chris Paul is playing next year, because I could think of a couple of teams that he could go to for not a lot of money.
Boston
and Milwaukee, and he would add an awful lot to both of those rosters. As an 18 to 24 minute, non-starter, like coming off the bench type of guy who is just going to keep your offense humming at a certain level when those rotations are made, when those substitutions are made, end of the first quarter, start of the second quarter. We see it all the time with certain teams where it's just like, okay, Embiid's gone out of the game, where are the Sixers going to get points here, or Harden, So Paul, he can score, but he can also make everybody else better. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes, Scott.
Yeah, for sure.
But I saw this, but I didn't think that much of it. Maybe it's because my whole career, I've had people like behind me in the grocery store saying, "I wish I had your job," and saying it to my kids.
Well, look, I'll just drop this last little bit before we move on. So, kind of what I'll say about this: if we're going to live in a society where people are going to treat your career as if it meant nothing if you don't win, I don't mean the little kid in their school, but I mean if fans as a whole, if media as a whole, if we're going to criticize guys for not winning championships, and we're going to come down hard on guys like Charles Barkley or James Harden for never having won before, then you can't criticize guys like Kevin Durant, who jumped in the middle of his career at his peak and went to go play for a championship level team.
True.
We can't criticize guys like that, because if we're going to make it all about championships, we can't get mad when a player makes a big move to go win a championship. You can't have it both ways.
I'm not in that camp that really criticizes Durant. Yeah. I would say that my take on Durant was more of, man, I wish he would have just tried to do it on his own. Because when you're one of the two best players in the NBA, and then to join already a championship team, they don't blame him for it necessarily.
Come on, Fred. Nobody does it on their own.
But there's a part, no, not on his own, but you know what I mean. Not joining a championship team, a team with the pedigree. So, but he did, and he won a couple, and I don't think it makes him less of a player. Some people say that, but I'm not in that camp.
All right, from talking about championships to a team who would be happy to even finish at 500.
Yeah.
The Atlanta Falcons, so I've been looking at
8-1.
Well, I guess that's possible,
what you gotta
right?
do,
They could be 500. So I was just going through some publications earlier today, just kind of seeing where they're gauging the Falcons, and I saw a bunch of different things out there, and they have Kyle Pitts on NFL.com as one of the top 9 or 10 players.
Okay.
That should that they're expecting the most improvement from, right?
Right.
So when you kind of look at the Falcons roster, they have a lot of young players like that. Is he probably the guy who you think the most, will sort of just jump and emerge this year? And
he's the obvious choice, right, Scott?
Right.
But a guy that you've mentioned many times on the defensive side, a new Falcon, could be in that group as well.
I'm talking about Jeff Okudah.
Yeah, I mean, right? Because when you look at this list, it's not just guys who, like Pitts is more of just been in the league a couple of years. Now it's time to take that next step. Some of the guys on this list, Dak Prescott, Quentin Nelson. Like Quentin Nelson,
he's a Hall of Fame career.
That's what I'm saying. But so, wait a minute. Why is he on this list? Well, he kind of had a down year last year. So there are this mix is a list of guys who could have breakout years, but also guys who could either get back to a level that they were at, or just get back to a level that they were at, right? Which, Bradley Chubb is on this list. So there are some
Bradley
guys.
Chubb's been kind of overrated to me, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't hurt that he had Von Miller next to him a lot of time when he was in Denver there.
Yeah,
so.
it just really, to me, he never played like a top outside pass rusher.
Yeah.
I mean, he was traded to the Dolphins. I know they expect a lot of good things from him, but I don't know. He's never really done it for me.
Right,
He never
so
really lived up to.
Some other guys
when
you
he was
got on this
drafted.
list, right? James Cook, Dalvin Cook's brother, incidentally, Dalvin
That's a
Cook,
good pick.
Released or notified that he's going to be released today by the Vikings, which comes as a little bit of a surprise to me. He did have a big cap number, but
Right. He's
he'll
never
probably go somewhere. Maybe he'll chase a ring. So James Cook, Chubb's on the list. DJ Moore is on the list. That's an interesting one to me.
He's a good
because
player.
we're putting a lot of eggs in the old, Fields basket there to see how that works.
We'll see how that goes. We'll see.
Right,
see.
right. Travis Etienne. Okay, that's kind of an obvious. So to me,
pretty good.
Etienne is a little bit of the Kyle Pitts, right?
Right.
That it's like it's time to really elevate. Etienne, I think, was,
He was
a little
solid
bit better.
last year, though.
Yeah, I think he was better than Pitts was.
Yeah.
So for him, it's more about becoming like a star back in the league. I think Pitts needs to at least be a top third tight end, right? So when you're talking about tight ends, he's got to be in that. He's got to be in the top 8. He's got to be a top 25% tight end.
Yeah, I mean, I
for
think
where
he has
they
to become
drafted him,
that.
he's got to be.
Yeah,
But he wasn't last year.
He hasn't been, and I think
Right.
I think he understands that, and I think the team understands that. So hopefully they'll put him in more positions and situations to have success, because I don't think they did that enough as an offense. I don't think they focused on getting him the ball enough. But he's also got to step his game up too, because Drake London caught a decent amount of balls.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess I would
If
ask,
he's-
why didn't Kyle Pitts?
Right. If he's back good from the knee injury, then
gotta ball out.
One thing you can say is he doesn't, aside from the knee injury, which he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear over
Right.
the last couple of years, because he didn't get a lot of balls last year, even
Yeah.
before the injury.
So from one football to another football, right?
Okay.
Football, right?
Yeah.
So how about Inter Miami, right? So obviously they signed they getting Messi.
Yeah.
Messi's on the way, right? So their IG following has really taken off in the last 24 hours, right? They've added over 4 million followers in the last 24 hours, giving them more Instagram followers than any NFL or MLB team.
That's
And
crazy.
of course, any other team in the MLS too.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about an instant impact. I mean, the man hasn't even stepped on the pitch yet,
Yeah.
and already everyone's just flocking there. Their ticket prices have gone from like what, $50 to $500 for the average seat. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I mean, I'm not even a soccer guy, and I'm looking at this like, really?
Yeah, so I am a soccer guy.
Okay, glad you're here.
From way back, and I was trying to put it in perspective for some people who weren't. And
Yeah.
Alan Devlin's a big, he's a big LeBron guy here, and he said, "Oh, it's like LeBron going to Shanghai Sharks," and I was like, "No, it's like LeBron going to the New Zealand Breakers." I mean,
The New Zealand Breakers.
Well, the MLS is not. I think after the NBA, the top Chinese league is probably among second, third, fourth in the world as far as like the best leagues you can play in, right?
yeah.
The MLS is not in that category. It's probably 12, 13, 14, 15, something like that.
Really?
Yeah. But
Interesting.
so he's going to play in a league where the talent is not close to what he was in. I mean, when you look at the Premier League and then La Liga and then the French League and Serie A and I just going through some of the leagues. I mean, you're coming way down when you get to MLS, and I think it's huge for MLS. I think it's a coup. I think he's going to bring more interest to the MLS than Beckham brought, because I think he's just a better
Yeah, that was a
player.
dud,
He's more
wasn't it, when Beckham
dynamic.
came?
He's still got some stuff in the tank for sure. The question is, how motivated will he be, and can he stay healthy? If he can stay healthy and he's motivated to like really play well in the MLS, and he doesn't get bored with it, bored with the fact that other players on the pitch can't see what he's seeing.
Yeah.
Because you do have to be at that level to understand like where he wants to go with the ball. But if he's engaged, I think he could have 2 or 3 really impactful years.
We're questioning whether he might be engaged. That's crazy, isn't it?
Well,
he's
I don't
getting
think
a lot to come here, man. You better be engaged.
Yeah, but I think it's more of a longer term play for him and for the MLS. And I mean like fully bought in. Again, use LeBron James at his age to go and play in a fifth-tier league somewhere else in the world, would you be surprised if there was a game or two where he was just kind of like, not at his full effort level that he would give in the NBA?
So Messi should just dominate then, right? I mean,
No,
if this league is so under what he's used to, right?
I mean, dominant in soccer is always a relative term, unless you're Erling Haaland, who's like dominated the Premier League at like 22 or whatever, how old he is. He's just had a phenomenal year. And, Messi at times has dominated leagues, but it's not quite like, it's not Barry Bonds hitting 73 home runs.
And see, for me as a person who isn't necessarily a fan of soccer, that's sometimes what I have trouble sort of quantifying, right, about a great soccer player, right? I mean, because I'll sit there and I'll watch a soccer match and the score will be 1-0.
Yeah.
But you're telling me that this one guy here is worth $8 zillion, and I can't really. It's hard for me to justify.
If you consistently win 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, 3-1. If you consistently do that, this is not a high scoring sport, right? So you can have a dominant 1-0 win in soccer. I mean, I'm an Italian national soccer fan. I mean, that's how Italy won a lot of games through the years in the World Cup, which was score a goal and then do not give the other team any hope. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Believe me, I will be going to an MLS game to see Messi play. Okay. I mean, it's the equivalent of going to see the best of the best. Play.
All right, so I'll tell you what. Before we get out of here, we want to know what's on your mind.
You want to know what's on my mind?
Yeah.
I don't know. Good question. Sports writer, sports talk, what we're doing right now, it's interesting because nobody's really paying attention closely to the NHL Stanley Cup Finals, but the Golden Knights are up on the Panthers. Looks like the Golden Knights might, take that series. And the talk out of Boston is that the Bruins made the wrong choice by letting their coach go last year, and he's coaching the Golden Knights. The Bruins won had more points than any franchise in NHL history during the regular season. Yet the narrative out of Boston was, man, that was a big mistake letting him go because the Golden Knights are now going to possibly win the Stanley Cup.
Kind of like the Celtics coach, right? No, I'm joking.
No, I mean, but it will be like so it's the equivalent of if Ime has the Rockets winning the NBA.
Well, that's not happening next year, but so
anyone who follows the NHL knows that once you get into the playoffs, it's a crapshoot. It's a literal crapshoot. Yeah. What's on your mind?
So what's on my mind? I see here Bryce Young. Big surprise. He's been elevated to the #1 quarterback in Carolina. So you know what that means. The Falcons play them week 1. So that means Bryce Young's debut might be down in Mercedes-Benz Stadium against the Falcons week 1. I'm just joking. Of course, that wasn't a surprise. He was drafted #1 overall.
Yeah.
And let's face it, it's probably not that hard to pass up Andy Dalton on the depth chart, especially at this point in his career. So I'm sure they were going to do everything they could to elevate that man to #1 so that he's ready to go week 1, because if you draft a guy that high, boy, you better be able to justify why you drafted him that high. So I pretty much assumed that he'd be out there for week 1. I just love how it's news, right? I mean, he could have essentially went out there and threw 14 balls into the dirt and he was going to be elevated to the #1 starter. So
maybe as the #1 pick, but there has been buzz. I will say there's been Bryce Young buzz. I haven't heard C.J. Stroud buzz. I have not heard. Actually, there was Will Levis buzz, and that was him, just being incredibly inaccurate on one of his throws.
I was gonna say, well, why you guys single out C.J. Stroud, huh? Because I was a Ohio State Buckeyes fan. Is that why you're gonna single him out?
Listen, I'm Scott. I'm just saying what I've heard, and
we all know
crickets. It's been crickets out of C.J.
We all know the history of those Ohio State quarterbacks in the NFL, right?
Long and storied history, right?
I know. Yeah, they haven't been as well. So look, I'll root for C.J.
We'll see. But no, my point was that there has been a lot of Bryce Young buzz from day one about him picking up the offense quick and really looking good in practice. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes, and hopefully he will be the week 1 starter at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, so we can all see him week 1.
Defense get after him.
Exactly. Well, that's Sports Tonight on a Thursday night. Thank you, Fred. Thank you for coming through and dropping your knowledge. We appreciate it.
Enjoyed it.
And we'll see you tomorrow night.
All right. See ya.
Later.